What's up, everybody? This is Kieran and Reese, otherwise known as the obsessed compulsive game of the O.C.G, and I'm here playing, you guessed it, Sea of Stars, baby! Right now it is 7:42, 7:43 a.m. on 7:43 a.m. on the 27th. Today is Tuesday. And last time we took some Tylenol was at 7:05 p.m. on Thursday. No. Not for a while, anyway. It's 7 a.m. here. I'm about to take 2 Tylenol and 2 ibuprofen. It always makes me feel better to take it on camera. That way it's like, yeah, my OCD doesn't make me think, oh, did I take it or did I not? I just have a headache. And it's the combination will have to be the best. It's a sinus headache. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's, yeah, I agree. The wonders of technology. That's a good part of the internet, how it brings people together. Ugh. I hate the way water tastes, but I made a conscious effort to be more hydrated lately, so when I drink a bottle of water, I just shotgun it. That way I have the hydration and to sit there and taste it. You know, kind of rip the Band-Aid off. I drink at least 2 bottles of water a day now. Good for you. I don't really like the way it tastes.
Boom. Fuck you. Yeah, I've beaten it already. I beat it at launch. It was a game I was looking forward to for some time. I got really close to 100%, but ultimately wasn't able to get it then because I was missing a couple items and it was like a needle in a haystack. I told myself I'd come back. Yeah, I agree. I told myself I'd come back. And then just a ton of time passed, and it got to the point where it was like a year, and I'm like, if I'm going to come back, I should just start over. And then the DLC, free DLC for this came out last week, so I finally decided, fuck it, and decided to make the plunge and replay it again. You have to be really far in the game to play the DLC. And yeah, this game has gorgeous colors. Sweet. And honestly, this isn't even the coolest areas. Later on, it even goes sci-fi. You actually go to a different universe, and it's all like fucking steampunky and desolate and shit. It's cool. It's still colorful, but it's all sci-fi and, you know, kind of post-apocalyptic. Yeah. The art in this game is an exceedingly... the art of this game is of an exceedingly high quality. And like I said, it was all hand done. And each location is completely different. You won't catch them reusing the same shit for different areas. So the sheer amount of locations in this game, and how pretty they are, and the fact that each one is its own basic tile set, is another reason why this game's awesome. And while it's 16-bit, of course, they do all kinds of stuff they couldn't have done back then with that actual technology. Actually, hold on a second. I'll show you something cool. See, like, this mist. It's all spooky. It actually moves and cascades when you go through it. And something about that I just find to be super fucking sick. And they have real-time lighting. Even though it's pixel art, and that comes in handy later because you gain the ability to switch the time of day, because they're the personification of the sun and moon. So later on, you can freely change the time of day at will by holding the left and right triggers, so you can actually see the shadows move and shit. Or like particularly here, you see the window coming through and the fog, and you actually see the light disperse as you move through it. Just cool shit like that. Stuff that obviously they never could have done back in the day. So it's kind of an interesting fusion of old and new. Like 5 gigs, I think. I know this was on Game Pass back in the day. at launch. I don't know if it still is, it might still be. Maybe it is on Game Pass. I definitely recommend playing it. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Or stuff like this, like how you can actually see the water caustics shimmering through the window. They never could have done that back on OG 16-bit hardware. And like I said, there's no two areas of this game that are alike. Same with the enemies. Yeah. Well, like I said, there's so many like pixel art and so many unique tile sets that it's huge. You know what I mean? A lot of RPGs, even classic Final Fantasy games back in the day, would reuse a lot of the same tile sets for a lot of areas. Of course, back then it was more understandable. But, you know, like they would build all the dungeons from the same dungeon tile set. Each part of this game is hand-designed. They also have a huge soundtrack. They actually have a bunch of, they actually got Hironobu Skaichi and a couple of others from, to do soundtrack for this game. So, yeah, I agree. Plus, this game has a much bigger focus on platforming. JRPGs back in the day didn't hardly have any, and this game does, while still being isometric, so they have to get really creative with the camera angles, and they do a really good job of it. As it's, isometric is typically top-down, but this is, like, slightly adjacent, so you can see depth and layers and shit, and that's a unique twist. And this game is clearly done in reverence of the classics that came before. Like, they made no bones about saying Chrono Trigger is an inspiration, classic Final Fantasy is an inspiration, but, they take their own spin on it. And that's the difference between taking inspiration from and being derivative of. Plenty of games take inspiration from games that have come before. The good games put their own spin on it. They take inspiration. They don't, steal from it. I played a good chunk of it way back in the day, but no, I haven't beaten it. I beat Final Fantasy 1. I didn't enjoy it, though. I think that game has aged very, very poorly. I appreciate what it did for the genre. It basically created the fucking JRPG genre. But, are you sure it's 3, or are you talking about... okay, I think you're talking about 6. That came out in America as 3, but it's actually 6. It's a whole fucked up thing, okay? For a long time, they couldn't bring Final Fantasy to America, and when they did, they didn't want to confuse people by saying they were some game they weren't. That they didn't have access to, so... When Final Fantasy VI came out over in America, it was the third American game. I think Final Fantasy 1 was... 3 was 1, 4 was 2, and 6 was 3. They decided to skip Final Fantasy 5 and the initial run. I don't know why. But, they didn't want to confuse people. Yes. You're talking about 6. They didn't want to confuse people by saying 6 when the other 3 weren't available, so they did that. It wasn't until Final Fantasy VII came out that they went back and corrected it and put it in the official number and said this is 6 and got people up to speed. Because they decided it was 7, that they would just call it 7 to avoid confusion. And not only that, but the number 7 is important in Final Fantasy VII. Like, it's used all throughout. Like, 7 is almost like the theme of that game. So they're like, but then when 7 came out, they're like, fuck happened to 4, 5, and 6? So they eventually re-released them and brought them over to the States. But yeah, 6 has a great story. A fucking phenomenal story. The Final Fantasy games, the classic ones, would have ones that were lighter on story and ones that were heavier on story. You had a lot of the ones with more job freedom were lighter on story, and then the ones with fixed jobs were heavier on story. Final Fantasy 1, pretty light on story. Final Fantasy 2, fixed characters, much heavier emphasis on story. Final Fantasy 3, job system, once again, light on story. Final Fantasy 4, heavy on story. Characters have fixed jobs, fixed roles. Final Fantasy 5, lighter on story, job system. Final Fantasy 6, fixed characters, much stronger emphasis on story. And it's not that the other ones are bad. It's just that they are less light on story. But for me, a large reason I love RPGs and I play RPGs is for the story. So I don't really like the ones that are light on story as much, honestly. Well, you know, dude, if you're gonna play 3-man, I would recommend playing the new version. They brought them to modern hardware with updated pixel art, basically like a pixel remake. They're still pixels, but they redrew all the art. It looks great because those games are fucking brutal. Without the classic, like the first 3 Final Fantasy games are fucking brutal. Without help, you know, the encounter rates are super high. You walk 2 steps, you get into a fight. They give you no guidance, and it's not no guidance in the sense that they're not hand-holding you. It's no guidance in the sense that you have no fucking idea what you're supposed to be doing. And sometimes the fucking order of stuff that you're supposed to do is so fucking nonsensical that it's not like, well, I need a guide. Like, you wouldn't know. Like, hey, you're gonna go over here, and you're gonna start over here in this temple, and then we're gonna expect you to go halfway around the world, on the world map, talk to one person, and then go all the way south, talk to one person, then come back. With no indications of why you would be doing that. You know? They definitely fixed a lot of it. They give you the ability to turn off random encounters and turn them back on at any time with the button press. I think it's one of the sticks, if I remember correctly. So you don't have to be ambushed by random encounters every 2 fucking steps. You can fight enough to level up and keep leveled and then turn them off. You know, they give you maps of each area. They tell you how much treasure is in each area. So you're not wondering, what did I miss? They autosave, whereas before the save files were like really far apart. So if you were like in a long dungeon and you didn't have a save point and you died, well, fuck you. You're gonna have to redo the whole dungeon. Now, I think like every room they autosave you, and at the start of each boss battle, they give you slightly more guidance where to go. I'd still recommend fucking using a guide. But they, in general, do a lot to soften the hardcore edge. I would not recommend playing the games as they were, unless you're a masochist. They were important to the genre. They basically created the genre of RPG, but they feel so basic and so hardcore that it's not even fun. And because the first 3 Final Fantasy games are pretty light on story, there's not even like a world hook to get you into, and because these games were basically the blueprint for RPGs, that was super important back in the day. And it still is. Like, you know, they'll always get credit for basically making RPGs a thing. But it means that pretty much any RPG you play now is better. You're not going to see any unique twist or unique spin. It's pretty much, because it's the blueprint that's now been put in every fucking RPG since the dawn of mankind, it's like you're playing something that literally any other RPG you could play would be better. Even like your party, man. In Final Fantasy 1 and 3, you can choose the jobs you're partying. And that's cool, right? If you don't choose right, you will fuck yourself. Okay? At the beginning of Final Fantasy 1, you choose the jobs for your 4 party members. And you can't ever change them. Ever. So if you decide to do a party setup and you don't like that setup, well, fuck you. You either gotta march on or you just gotta fucking restart the game. And 3, it's really easy to fuck yourself. So, you know, if you were going to play the classic games, play the remastered versions. Because they do a lot to help mitigate that. But I would suggest, if you're really going to go back and play the original 16-bit Final Fantasies, play yes, it was. It absolutely was. It was a big deal at the time. Yeah. It was one of the first JRPGs to have no random encounters, where you would run into the enemies on the field and fight them seamlessly. I think Chrono Trigger might have been one of the very first games ever to not have random encounters. Well, you know, the RPG did not have random encounters, and have you fight them on the field and then seamlessly enter and exit battle. Which in Chrono Trigger was a big fucking deal at the time. Yeah, Chrono Trigger's fucking great. Chrono Trigger's aged like fine wine. The fact that they haven't re-released Chrono Trigger on any modern platforms is fucking baffling to me. It's, to this day, it is so beloved. And yet the last console like they released it for was the fucking DS back in 2009. It's crazy. They even re-released Chrono Cross, and Chrono Cross is great. But it's like, why would you do Chrono Cross and not fucking Chrono Trigger? Either way, like most of the time, Square Enix ports their games to death. Like the original Final Fantasy games have been ported so many fucking times. But it's like with Chrono Trigger, despite it being so popular, people love it. They just don't port it to modern systems. It's fucking weird. I would kill to be able to play a modern version of Chrono Trigger with fucking trophies. That would be amazing. I played the shit out of it on the DS, which the DS version was, pretty much the same game with some added stuff. But, obviously I was too young as a kid to play it on the SNES. I kind of missed that boat. Either way, but yeah, I've extensively played Chrono Trigger. Sony has been, or Square Enix has been remaking their games with the 2D HD pixel art, like Octopath Traveler, which I'm a huge fan of the art style, like 3D polygonal environments, but they look like a diorama, and then pixel characters. They did it for Octopath Traveler, Live a Life remake, Dragon Quest III remake most recently. I'm a huge fan of the art style because it looks more modern, but it keeps the aesthetic. It's like obviously better graphics than you ever could have got originally, but it still keeps the original feel intact, and it's not super budget intensive. Like Final Fantasy VII, them remaking it in modern 3D graphics is fucking awesome, but it took an insane amount of money. Whereas the 2D HD games are still a huge step up visually, but are pretty cheap to make. So a lot of these games, like Live a Life, super great game, but it was very niche, would not have gotten a remake if it was a full 3D remake. But they did get a 2D HD remake that did really well, because it was nowhere as expensive to make. So, I don't know why they haven't done that for Chrono Trigger. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen Octopath Traveler gameplay, or played it, or or Star Ocean 2, they remade that with that art style. Looked fucking fantastic. So that would be the perfect solution for remaking Chrono Trigger. They wouldn't have to break the bank to make it, and it would still look 1,000 times better while keeping the original aesthetic. Then they could add quality of life features, yada yada yada. Either way, but yeah, Chrono Trigger is fucking great. And this game clearly does take inspiration from it. You can tell. Not that they hide it. Like, the director of this game literally said that he was a huge fan of Chrono Trigger and that it was like one of the main inspirations for this game. And he actually got the composer of Chrono Trigger to do some music tracks for this game, which is Nobuo Uematsu is his name. Super great fucking composer. Did the first 10 Final Fantasy soundtracks. Xenogears, he's the fucking GOAT. So the fact that they actually were able to get him to make original music for this was fucking sick. he doesn't do the whole soundtrack because he's retired. But I think so. There were parts of this game that actually made me tear up. Yeah, I agree. That's something that they did a really good job of in the remake. The fucking remakes, man, of Final Fantasy VII are fucking insane. In particular, Rebirth. Rebirth is fucking insane. Rebirth is the second part of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. When they decided to remake Final Fantasy VII, they wanted to not only keep the areas as they were, but prettier, but they wanted to massively expand them. Because they could obviously realize the world much, much, much more than they could back then, but they found that when they massively expanded the map, that it was great, but they couldn't do the whole game like that in one game. So they either had a choice to reduce the scale of the remake, scale back on some areas and cut them, or put in multiple parts. So the Final Fantasy VII Remake is split into 3 parts. The first 2 are out, and the third one is coming out in sometime in the future. Now that may sound like them nickel and diming people. They're not. People were afraid when they first announced that they were going to do like Telltale games, you know, and that people would be essentially paying 3 times the price for the same amount of game. That is not the case. They are 3 full fucking size games. Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1, for example, is just Midgar. It's the entire Midgar section, but it is literally bigger than the entire original game. It is the same length as all of Final Fantasy VII. So they took Midgar, and they pretty much made Midgar the size it actually would have been. That you saw in cutscenes and shit. And, made it, 10 times the size. And then Rebirth is fucking insanely large. Okay, Rebirth is literally the biggest single-player Final Fantasy ever. The only Final Fantasy games that are bigger is 11 and 14, and those are MMOs that they spent decades adding on to. Rebirth is by far the biggest Final Fantasy game ever, single-player. It is over 100 hours. Over. Just for Rebirth by itself. It's 150 gigs. Rebirth is fucking ridiculous. And honestly, it's not even gonna be the full, it's not even the most insane one. The third game is coming, probably in 2026 or 2027. And it is going to be so large that it makes Rebirth look small. So, the first chunk of the Final Fantasy VII Remake is Midgar. The second chunk, Rebirth, is after they leave Midgar to when Aerith dies. The third chunk, the final chunk, will be everything from there to the end of the game. But, okay. They switched some of the plot order around, but they have assured people that everything that was in the original game will be here. Some of the things were shifted around to Part 3. Like Rocket Town, where you go with Sid, it's going to be in the third game, because they wanted to make it like a full, like, massive town, and, you know, stuff like that, but it will be in the game. And so is Wutai. You know, Wutai originally was an optional location that you could entirely miss. It was not that big. Yuffie was an entirely optional character. Most people didn't even get her. And so is Vincent. And because they were optional characters, they had very little impact on the story. Yuffie in Rebirth, for example, is a mandatory character and has 10 times the amount of scenes in Rebirth than she did in the original game, where she was mainly forgettable. And so is Vincent Valentine. He's way more fleshed out now as a main part of the story, instead of just having like 2 scenes in the game. You know, which is funny because people love Vincent Valentine so much, and yet he's hardly in the game story. Because they, you know, he was optional, and they almost got rid of him and cut him, and then kept him. So, you know, I like it a lot better that they're actually now getting equal share of the story in side quests and shit like that. But later on in Final Fantasy VII, they went all out. They went all out. They did, yeah. Okay, so for the third part, it's going to be ridiculous because if you can remember, in Final Fantasy VII, it's mostly linear until you get the airship near the end of 7, the High Wind, and then you can pretty much revisit the whole world, even Midgar. You go back to Midgar, and that's where you get a bunch of the side quests and all that stuff. You know, they have said that 1, nothing will be cut that was in the original game. They may have shifted some things around, but it's all going to be here. Number 2, that the airship will be fully flyable, and it will not be a menu. Like, oh, a fast travel thing, because that's what people thought they were going to make it. Okay, so basically what that means is Part 3, whenever that comes out, whatever it's called, because they've said it will have R in the name. The first part is called Remake, second part is called Rebirth. We don't know what the thing is, but it will have an R. That's the motif. Who knows what it'll be called, but it will have an R. It will start with an R. But basically, according to Square Enix, Part 3 will literally have every single location from Part 1 and 2 in it, and then a shit ton more. So they spent an entire game in Midgar. They spent the second game in like the first continent. The third game is going to have the entire second continent, and it's also going to have all of the first and all of Midgar, when those were both big enough to be their own games. And you're going to freely fly the airship around. They just said we're not scaling it down. So basically, you're going to be able to fly the airship around and just fucking land anywhere. Which is insane. But not only that, but the first 2 games were on Unreal 4. When they made the first game, it took like 4 or 5 years to make. Unreal 5 didn't exist. And then with the second game, they opted to use 4 because it was quicker and they didn't want to make people wait too long. It already took 4 years for Rebirth to come out. So, but Rebirth Part 3, or whatever the fuck they call it, like I said, it'll have R in the title, will use Unreal Engine 5. So, not only will it have every single location from the past 2 games, which is a lot, and a bunch of new ones, and a fully flyable airship, but it will have a substantial graphics overhaul because they're moving from Unreal 4 to 5. Okay? So, like I said, and when you realize that, like I was just explaining, that Rebirth is already the biggest single-player Final Fantasy game by itself, including all of Rebirth, all of the prior game in Midgar, and all the new shit, it's mind-boggling. And, you know, I know I went on a bit of a tangent. I just wanted to explain to you so you can understand how fucking ridiculous the scope of this last game is going to be. And, you know, normally, if they said it was going to be that big, another developer, I'd be like, I don't believe that. But considering how big Rebirth was, and it being by far the biggest, I believe it. It's Rebirth by itself is already the biggest, orders of magnitudes. And if there was going to be a game to get that level of budget, it would be 7, and it would be the final part. So it makes sense they're hitting all the stops. So Rebirth is crazy big. Part 3 is going to be ridiculous. Like, Rebirth is already one of the biggest RPGs ever made. Like, no shit. So, including everything from Rebirth. Actually, I'm currently in the middle of playing it right now. I'll probably play it later. If you're around. And to give you an example of what I mean, okay, so Calm is the first town in Final Fantasy VII that you explore outside of Midgar. It's a tiny little town. It's like one screen. Okay? In Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, it is a massive town with a giant clock tower, a wine yard, an upper, lower level, shops that you can enter, a bookstore, a parade street, a canal. So we're talking like a single screen town with like just an inn. It's like a massive, massive town. And that imagine that increase in scale for everything. Every location was expanded like that. And that's why Rebirth is so fucking large. And why they had to put it in 3 games. Because imagine taking every single location from 7 and expanding it like that. And then trying to fit that into 1 game. You know? So, you know me, I will attack people who, Yes. Yes, it is. Hold on, you know what, actually, I'll start it up now. Just give me a second. I'll get to a save point. It's a chance to show it to you. I'm excited talking about it. Here we go. Give me 1 second, I'll be right back.